to jump on and just address some of the questions that were in my DM last week about why people see such great success with fat loss and they're very American and they lose all this weight and then all of a sudden they gain it all back. Well, there are a lot of reasons why that happens. One of those is because people set unrealistic, and I should say really just their New Year's resolutions are the same every year. Okay, so whether they're realistic or not, they come out very hard in the beginning of the year. January 1st is usually when the light switch flips on and people are like, I'm going to get all this crap out of the house. But really the problem with that is that it doesn't set you up for success the other months of the year after you've raced to the finish line for 90 days and given it 100%. And then you kind of tap the brakes and you gain all that weight back from, June through December. Or perhaps you're like most Americans and you gain it back October through December. One, it's very hard on the body to do that every single year. Jay Gallagly, he says, I'm proof. You're not alone. That's probably because what ends up happening is, you change everything in January, February, and March, and you just can't sustain that harsh and rigid lifestyle for longer than those 3 months. So what I would highly recommend for most people is to walk before you run, and run before you sprint, and sprint before you become this finely tuned athlete, right? So when you come out in January, try to pick up momentum, but don't change every single thing about your lifestyle and make it so harsh and so rigid that you cannot stay with it. One of the things that I see people do is try to eat completely clean. They get everything that they would label bad out of the house. And that's not the best method. Time and time again, you'll see that these things kind of just infiltrate back into your life, or you're like, I'm going to have a cheat weekend or a cheat day or cheat meal or whatever you want to call it because you're cheating on your quote unquote clean eating lifestyle. Eating high quality is great. Eating nutrient dense food is wonderful. But limiting anything that would not be high quality or nutrient dense is probably the reason that you're falling off, because we can only sustain that for so long before we're going to have food fatigue, before we're going to give up, before we're going to be burnt out, right? So what you need to do is walk before you run. So start implementing healthier foods into your diet now, right at the new year. Then start introducing yourself to exercise. Maybe you start walking next week and you add a couple days of strength training into the mix. That doesn't mean that you have to go to the gym every single day, 6 or 7 days a week, like it's a job, which is why people get burnt out and fatigued. Like, we know with our job, we like to go on vacations once in a while. Well, it's the same thing with eating. It's the same thing with training. So whatever you decide to implement it in a manner that you can actually sustain long term, not just for 90 days. Because anything that you can sustain for longer than 90 days or even 6 months for that matter is practical, it's fun, you're going to need to change it up. Change up your foods all the time so you don't get food fatigue. Don't limit things or create off limits foods for yourself, because when you do that, the tendency for people is anything that you create off limits, you're going to want more of, right? And so it's just a matter of time. I mean, you don't have weak willpower. You're not a weak person. You're not weak-minded. It's just that for 90 days or for 3 months or even a month, for that matter, it's very difficult to stick to the same 10 foods. And who wants to do that for the rest of their life? And it's just this constant cycle, this hamster wheel, if you will, of frustration and manipulation. And it really teaches us that the systems that we set up for ourselves are not set up for long-term sustainability. They're set up for a quick fix. So implement small changes in January and then crank up the heat when it comes to February. And if you can handle that, crank up the heat again. You don't want to go like a race car shot out of a cannon in January and then burn out by March and not be able to sustain all this hard work and all of this wonderful, these processes that you have learned and gotten really good at and turned into habits. So that's my advice for you guys. Every year I see people set these crazy New Year's resolutions. What I would highly recommend is setting one resolve each month. So let's say January, you're going to work on water intake, and you get very good and very consistent at your water intake in January. And then that's not so hard anymore. So now February, you're going to look around and find new prep tools, things that you can add into your prep routine that make things stupid simple, like bachelor prep. We're talking a rice cooker, maybe it's an air fryer, maybe you do not have a crock pot and you've never used one because you're afraid, because you've screwed up all this other food prep. Well, guess what? You can find things that are stupid simple. It is. Crystal Jones says, it's like running a marathon. Sprinting out the gate is not good. You're going to pull a hamstring, you're going to derail, and at some point, that train is going to come right off the tracks, isn't it, Crystal? So then maybe in February, you add a new prep tool that makes your food prep a lot easier. And you know, if you struggle with food prep, that's not going to be a month-long goal. That's going to be something that is ongoing, that you have to keep new and innovative all the time. I will tell you, the things that I add into my prep are things that I really like. I love burgers, so I add burgers into my prep. And I make them as high quality as I possibly can at home. That way, when I go out to eat, I do know approximately what the value of those burgers are going to be with margin, because again, I'm going to a restaurant. I don't feel guilty about it. I add the burger into my food prep for the week. If I want to have burgers twice that week, I can do that. It's the same thing with breakfast food. I love breakfast food, so a lot of times I will allow myself to have breakfast food, and I keep my macros fairly close to the same. So if I do a pancake and a couple eggs for my dinner, the next day I might do a couple whole grain waffles. I really try to keep them very smart and very simple so that I don't overcomplicate things. When we start to overcomplicate things, that's when we fall off track. And what I notice with people and prep is that they make their prep so boring that they have food fatigue within a couple weeks. So don't eat the same thing every single day. Make sure that you are actually changing up something in your routine. And I always tell my clients on a daily basis, you should be having something that you really look forward to, that you enjoy, and you really love every single day in your plan. Because again, food fatigue happens very quickly for most people. I would say 95% of people within a couple days can't eat the same thing, or they have food fatigue and they want to go off their plan. So being on a plan doesn't mean that you're on some strict, rigid eating plan. It means that you have a plan that works for you that might be different from me. I get food fatigue very quickly. I don't like to have the same thing for more than a couple days at a time. So what I have found works well for me, that might work well for you, is having the same lunch and maybe the same snack, and varying your breakfast and your dinner meal, or you have the same or similar breakfast meals every day, similar very high quality prep lunch that's really practical, that will keep you satiated and full until maybe you train. And then maybe your pre-training snack is a little bit different every single day, because that's something that you really look forward to, kind of like my clients do. They love their pre-workout snack and they also like their snack. A lot of people have found that to be a very merited way to do their nutrition, food prep. And then dinner is different every single night. And so what they do is they put the dinner in their macro system. And if they have to make small adjustments here or there in the last meal to make sure that they don't go over on their macros, then they can just change the serving size of that last meal so that it is a workable situation for their family. And if the family is prepped together, that's always what I encourage. I don't think that anyone needs to be cooking separate meals for themselves that they wouldn't eat with their family. That's just not even practical. I'm telling you that you can get mad shredded and lean even by implementing these small structural changes. So in January, you're going to work on water. In February, you're going to work on your meal prep tools and maybe acquiring some things that are a little bit easier for you to finish your meal prep, right? Maybe in March now, you're going to turn up the volume a little, and now you're going to go 3 or 4 days of strength training to the gym every week, because you can take that on, your time permits for it. And every week your goal is 3 workouts, but if you get 4, perfect. That means that you've exceeded your expectations on certain weeks for March, right? I don't like when people set up expectations that they're going to go to the gym 6 or 7 days, because again, that's a job. And food prepping is hard enough. Staying on your nutrition plan, which is 60 to 70% of it for most people, is a hard enough task. It's a difficult enough practice that if you take that on and you stay very consistent with that the entire year of 2021, you are going to see great results with your aesthetics. That's for sure. You're going to see great results with your fat loss, especially if you're at calorie balance. And then maybe in April, you get really strict about your calorie balance, and everything that you are going to eat, you scale measure it so that you can see what 4 ounces of protein looks like. A lot of us think we know what 4 ounces of protein looks like. A lot of us think we know what 100 grams of cooked rice looks like until we really put it on the food scale, and it starts to astonish you that 2 tablespoons of peanut butter is actually not 32 grams. It's more, right? And so you've been entering it in your system as 2 tablespoons, but it's really not 32 grams. It's more like 38 to 40 grams. And so you are moderately off on that, okay? So maybe April is a month where you kind of check yourself before you wreck yourself in terms of food portions. And you really learn in April, what does a real true portion look like? And April is your month of exact tracking, right? Then you go back to a little bit more flexibility because you can trust yourself in May. And maybe in May, you add a little bit different type of training because you've been doing the same kind of periodization now for 10 to 12 weeks, and it's time to change things up. This is how you make fitness fun. It's how you keep it practical. It's how you make it innovative. And here's the thing, anything we do for long enough, we are going to adapt to. And that adaptation process happens with food, it happens with training, it happens with calories, it happens with everything, right? So we've got to kind of tweak things and change our plan and change our course just a little bit here and there. That doesn't mean that we have to make big, huge changes. It just means that every month, try to implement a new practice and get good at it before you move on to something else. And if in January you don't quite do as well as you thought with your water goal, then move that into February. And if in February you're still only hitting the gym twice, move that into March. Then turn the heat up a little bit. Try to hit those 2 or 3 days, and more frequently 3 days a week. Guys, it is all about how you pace yourself. The pace is very important. And I read a lot of content out there. I love reading Instagram content. So for those of you who take so much time to write your content, thank you. I read quite a bit of content. I love content. And I love when people share free information that they are not hoarding, that is valuable and has science behind it. That's what I love. So the consensus this year in 2020 for a lot of people has been that, you got to go hard or not at all. I disagree with that. I don't think that you have to go hard or not at all. What I think for some people might work well is learning to walk before they run and learning to run before they sprint. Because I will tell you this, as a coach, the number one thing I see happen is that honeymoon phase. And it's the same for dating. It's the same for everything. That 90 days when you first start a program, you are super committed, super dedicated. It gets all of your time or most of it. And then the luxury and the motivation, the emotion starts to wear off. We need new dopamine. We need new dopamine. We need new dopamine. And so we're always searching for that dopamine, right? And that's what it is with fat loss, is a lot of people are like, this is great and I lost 15 pounds, but it's not exciting anymore. Well, you're going to have to recreate that excitement because, again, motivation is an emotion and it is up to you to recreate that. So when you find yourself losing motivation, it's probably time to change some of the systems, meaning it's time to rotate new, innovative, fun things into your meal plan. It's time to rotate your pre-training meals. How do you know what you train well off of if you never change or rotate your pre-training meals, right? So it's really important to look at the dysfunction before the train comes off the tracks, right? So I start to feel these things and notice that my training is monotonous when I'm now like, I don't really want to go to the gym today. And usually I find that that starts happening about week 10 to 12 into a bodybuilding periodization or bodybuilding cycle for me, because it's done by myself, meaning that I have to show up every day. There's no one to keep me accountable. And when I start feeling that, that's when I shift gears with my training and maybe might incorporate something like F45 or a group training mix or something of that matter, where I will do some cardio, group training, or circuit training with a friend or a couple people, and that will be a change to my training that I don't usually have, and it will also be something that keeps me accountable. If I feel like I'm lagging in the accountability area, that I know is going to at some point make me feel like I don't want to go to the gym and just drag myself through these monotonous bodybuilding workouts anymore. We have to have different little mesocycles and different cycles of periodization in our training, or we are going to get very fatigued with that as well. So you find what works for you this year. And I will tell you, if you know how to see these obstacles coming in the windshield, right through the windshield, and you're driving your car, then you're not looking in the rear view mirror like, oh my gosh, I failed at this 100 times. I know I'm going to fail at this again this year. Keep looking forward. And when you see those obstacles coming, or you see that there's construction coming up ahead, you have to know that you're going to have to adjust course just a little bit. And that is the way it is with nutrition. That's the way it is with training. It's the way it is with everything. So I want to empower you guys going into the new year this year, not to make resolutions that you know you will not keep. Get your calendar out, write down a goal, and make sure that you get good and proficient with that goal before you move on to something else. Look at it this way. If you perfect 3 or 4 things this year in 2021, those are 3 or 4 things that you did not have perfected last year.